In the year 2150, humanity had mastered the art of mining deep into the most dangerous and uncharted parts of space. The new explosive mining technique was a breakthrough, allowing miners to reach the richest veins of minerals hidden under planets' harsh crusts. The explosions were controlled, precise, and quick. But no one could have predicted the disaster that would follow when the crew of the Ether detonated the largest charge in the history of mining. The mission was simple. They were on a barren planet, one that no one had dared to explore. But after sending probes deep into the surface, the scans revealed an enormous deposit of rare metals, the kind that could change the course of human history. The crew had been chosen for their skills and experience, but this was a mission no one had prepared for. Commander Ava Klein stood at the front of the operations room, her eyes scanning the monitors as her team prepared for the final blast. "We've got one shot at this," she said, her voice steady, but there was tension in her eyes. "Let's make it count." "Charge ready, Commander," came the reply from Lieutenant Marcus Dean, the explosives specialist. "We'll hit the target in 3, 2, 1. The ground shook as the massive explosion tore through the planet's surface. Ava gripped the edge of the console, bracing herself as the ship's hull rattled. The blast was perfect, too perfect. They had expected a ripple effect, a tremor, but what happened next was something no one had foreseen. The planet's surface cracked open like a broken egg, revealing something dark beneath a massive chamber, hidden for centuries, possibly millennia. It was unlike anything the crew had ever seen. The metal walls of the chamber shimmered with an eerie glow, and the air was thick with an energy that made their skin crawl. "Commander, we've found something." Marcus's voice trembled over the comm. This wasn't part of the planet's natural formation. "Something's in there." Ava's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about? Can we get a clear image?" The screen flickered, showing a dark, vast space stretching deep below the surface. It looked almost alive. Strange symbols covered the walls, symbols that looked like nothing from any known language. In the center of the chamber stood a giant oblong object, humming with energy. It didn't belong here. It wasn't human-made. And worse, it wasn't dead. "Get me a team down there, now," Ava ordered. But before anyone could move, the ship's lights flickered, and the whole vessel was struck by an intense force. The ship lurched, and alarms blared. "What the hell just happened?" Marcus shouted. Ava's eyes widened as the readings on her console went haywire. The ground was shifting. The very core of the planet seemed to be reacting to the explosion. It was as if the planet itself had been awakened, disturbed by the blast. "We need to get out of here," Marcus said, panic creeping into his voice. Now, but it was already too late. The ship was jolted by another massive shockwave, stronger this time, rattling the crew. Ava had no choice but to make an immediate decision. "Get to the emergency pods," she ordered. But as they started heading toward the escape pods, a voice echoed through the ship's intercom, cold, unfeeling, and utterly alien. "Why have you disturbed us?" The crew froze. The voice wasn't human. It came from the very core of the planet. There was something down there, something that had been waiting. Ava's mind raced. The explosion had triggered something far more dangerous than a simple mine. The object they had uncovered was alive, an ancient, forgotten race that had lain dormant beneath the planet for centuries, perhaps even longer. Their technology, their weapons, and their knowledge were far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered. And now they were awake. And angry. "We need to leave now, Commander," Marcus urged, his voice rising with fear. Ava looked at the crew, their faces pale with terror. They were on the edge of something far beyond their understanding, and there was no way to predict what would happen next. The escape pods were the only option, but the alien voice spoke again, this time more threatening. "You have awakened the Guardians. You will pay the price." Suddenly, the ship was under attack. It wasn't just physical, it was as if the planet itself was retaliating. The walls trembled, the metal groaned under pressure, and the emergency systems flickered. Ava and her team rushed to the pods, but the path was blocked by strange, shifting walls of energy. The alien technology was awakening, activating defenses designed for a time long before humanity's first step on this planet. Desperate, Ava made a snap decision. To the surface. We'll take the lander. But when they reached the surface, they saw something that froze them in place. The ground itself was shifting, rising into massive pillars, and the sky was filled with strange lights. The entire planet was alive, and it was fighting back. The very core was sending waves of destructive energy into the atmosphere, a force too strong for their ship to escape. "We should never have come here," Marcus said quietly, fear in his eyes. Ava didn't answer. She was too focused on the terrifying realization that humanity had just awakened something far older, far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. They had wanted resources. They had wanted wealth. But what they had found was something that could destroy them all. As the ground beneath them continued to shift and crack open, Ava knew one thing for certain. This was no longer just about mining. It was about survival. And the explosion that had been meant to bring humanity riches had unleashed a terror beyond anything they were ready for. The other had awoken something that would not rest until every last human paid the price. And the real fight for survival was only just beginning. Captain Zane Voss stood at the observation deck of the Eclipse, staring out at the asteroid belt that sprawled across the edge of the Cerulean system. For years, humanity had searched these asteroids for valuable minerals, but nothing had ever been this extraordinary. The latest scan had picked up something deep inside one of the largest asteroids, a mysterious glowing rock that pulsed with energy. It was unlike anything they had ever encountered, and the crew was ready to find out what it was. "Commander," Lieutenant Tara Hayes called from behind, her voice tense. "The scans, they don't make sense. The readings are off the charts. Whatever this rock is, it's not just a mineral. It's something else." Zane turned to face her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean something else? The rock, it's sending out some kind of signal. Not natural. Almost like it's calling out." Zane's eyes narrowed. This wasn't the first time they'd found something strange in deep space, but the feeling in his gut told him this was different. "Prepare the mining crew. I want that rock out of there." The Eclipse settled gently onto the surface of the massive asteroid. The mining crew was already suited up, ready to go. Zane, Tara, and a handful of engineers descended to the surface, the air thick with tension. They made their way toward the core of the asteroid, where the glowing rock was buried beneath layers of solid rock. The feeling of unease only grew as they got closer. "Ready to drill, Captain," said Dr. Marcus Trent, the lead geologist. He stood beside the massive drilling rig, his hands shaking. Zane nodded. "Do it." The drill whined as it cut through the asteroid's surface, and soon the rock was exposed. It shimmered with an unnatural light, almost alive, like it was watching them. Tara leaned in closer, her breath caught in her throat. This is wrong. It feels wrong." Before anyone could say anything else, the ground shook violently. The rock seemed to pulse even brighter, sending out waves of energy that rocked the mining equipment. Sparks flew and alarms blared. "Get back!" Zane shouted, but it was too late. A massive explosion of energy erupted from the rock, sending everyone flying back. The crew scrambled to their feet as the asteroid trembled beneath them. The rock glowed with an intense, violent light, and suddenly the ground split open. Something massive began to rise from the depths of the asteroid. It was a ship, an alien ship, dark and ancient, covered in strange symbols. It had been buried beneath the asteroid for eons, waiting to be awakened. And now, the rock had called it to life. "Everyone, get back to the ship. Now." Zane barked. The crew scrambled toward the Eclipse, but the alien ship wasn't alone. Smaller craft, sleek and deadly, rose from the depths, swarming like a hive of angry bees. They darted toward the Eclipse, firing beams of energy at the mining crew. "We're not gonna make it," Tara shouted, as one of the smaller ships fired a blast that struck the asteroid's surface nearby, sending rocks flying. Zane gritted his teeth. "We need to stop them before they reach the ship. Everyone, fight back." The crew fought valiantly, using every weapon at their disposal. The alien ships, however, were faster, more agile, and their technology was far beyond anything humanity had. It didn't take long before the Eclipse was struck by a direct hit, sending the ship into a sharp spin. "Get us out of here," Zane ordered, gripping the controls. The Eclipse shot upward, narrowly avoiding another blast. But as they ascended, something strange happened. The alien ships weren't just attacking, they were following them, relentlessly. "They're tracking us," Tara said, panic in her voice. "This isn't just an attack. It's an invasion." Zane's mind raced. The rock, it wasn't just a rock. It was a signal. A call to them. And now they're coming after us. The Eclipse shot into hyperspace, but the alien ships followed, their glowing energy weapons lighting up the void. It didn't matter how fast they went. The alien ships were faster. Zane looked at the crew, their faces filled with fear, knowing there was no way to outrun them. "We have to make a stand," he said. "They're not just going to leave us alone. This rock, it broke something. And now they're coming for us, for the entire galaxy." The battle was fierce. The Eclipse's weapons were no match for the alien ship's technology. And as the crew fought desperately, they realized the truth: this wasn't just an attack on a single ship. The alien race had been waiting for something, and the rock had called them to reclaim what was theirs. But what did they want with humanity? What had they been waiting for? The answer came when a deep voice echoed through the ship's communication system, cold and unfeeling. "You have awakened us. Now you will face the consequences." The crew knew they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. The rock that had broken the asteroid had broken much more than just a piece of space. It had broken the piece that had held the galaxy together for centuries. And now, an ancient war was beginning, one that would bring destruction to everything in its path. As Zane looked at the alien ships closing in on them, he realized one terrifying truth. The rock wasn't just a signal, it was a key. And they had opened the door to something that would change everything. The galaxy would never be the same again. In the far reaches of the galaxy, there was a planet silent and forgotten. It was the kind of world that explorers avoided, left behind in the search for more valuable discoveries. But then, a small team of human miners aboard the Dauntless found something strange. An uncharted region of the planet's surface showed signs of rare metals, enough to change the course of the mining industry forever. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: dig deep, extract the minerals, and return home. But they weren't prepared for what they would uncover. Captain Lena Wright stood at the front of the mining team, staring down at the planet below. Her eyes narrowed as she looked over the team's equipment and the readouts on the monitors. The scanner data was off, the minerals were deep, but there was something more. Something beneath the surface. "We're going down, Captain," said Lieutenant Dax Harris, his voice calm but with a hint of hesitation. "I don't like this. The readings are all over the place. Whatever's down there. It's not just minerals." Lena didn't answer immediately. Her mind was focused on the task. Set the drill to full power. We're here to make history. The drill began its descent into the planet's crust. As it cut deeper, the crew could feel the ship vibrate with each layer it passed. But as the drill hit a strange, unnatural hardness, the entire system began to flicker. Lena gripped the console tightly. "What's happening?" she asked, her voice tense. "Something's wrong," Dax replied, his face pale. "The drill's overheating. Something's interfering with the power." Before Lena could respond, a strange hum filled the air, low and rumbling, as if the planet itself was alive. The drill shook violently, and with a final explosive burst, it broke through the surface. But instead of hitting solid rock, the drill pierced through a dark, hollow space. A wave of cold air rushed into the mining bay, sending chills down the crew's spines. The ground beneath the ship trembled, and a blinding light shot up from the newly opened cavity. "Shut it down. Shut it down now." Lena shouted, but it was too late. The ship lurched as the powerful surge of energy cracked through the vessel's outer hull. The lights flickered and went out, and for a moment, they were plunged into complete darkness. Silence. Then, a voice, deep and ancient, echoed through the ship's intercom system. "You should not have come. We're not going to make it." Tara shouted as one of the smaller ships fired a blast that struck the asteroid's surface nearby, sending rocks flying. Zane gritted his teeth. We need to stop them before they reach the ship. Everyone, fight back. The crew fought valiantly, using every weapon at their disposal. The alien ships, however, were faster, more agile, and their technology was far beyond anything humanity had. It didn't take long before the Eclipse was struck by a direct hit, sending the ship into a sharp spin. Get us out of here, Zane ordered, gripping the controls. The Eclipse shot upward, narrowly avoiding another blast. But as they ascended, something strange happened. The alien ships weren't just attacking, they were following them, relentlessly. They're tracking us, Tara said, panic in her voice. This isn't just an attack. It's an invasion. Zane's mind raced. The rock, it wasn't just a rock. It was a signal. A call to them. And now they're coming after us. The Eclipse shot into hyperspace, but the alien ships followed, their glowing energy weapons lighting up the void. It didn't matter how fast they went, the alien ships were faster. Zane looked at the crew, their faces filled with fear, knowing there was no way to outrun them. We have to make a stand, he said. They're not just going to leave us alone. This rock, it broke something. And now, they're coming for us, for the entire galaxy. The battle was fierce. The Eclipse's weapons were no match for the alien ship's technology. And as the crew fought desperately, they realized the truth. This wasn't just an attack on a single ship. The alien race had been waiting for something, and the rock had called them to reclaim what was theirs. But what did they want with humanity? What had they been waiting for? The answer came when a deep voice echoed through the ship's communication system, cold and unfeeling. You have awakened us. Now you will face the consequences. The crew knew they were no longer just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the future of the galaxy. The rock that had broken the asteroid had broken much more than just a piece of space. It had broken the piece that had held the galaxy together for centuries. And now, an ancient war was beginning, one that would bring destruction to everything in its path. As Zane looked at the alien ships closing in on them, he realized one terrifying truth. The rock wasn't just a signal, it was a key. And they had opened the door to something that would change everything. The galaxy would never be the same again. In the far reaches of the galaxy, there was a planet silent and forgotten. It was the kind of world that explorers avoided, left behind in the search for more valuable discoveries. But then, a small team of human miners, aboard the Dauntless, found something strange. An uncharted region of the planet's surface showed signs of rare metals, enough to change the course of the mining industry forever. The mission was supposed to be straightforward: dig deep, extract the minerals, and return home. But they weren't prepared for what they would uncover. Captain Lena Wright stood at the front of the mining team, staring down at the planet below. Her eyes narrowed as she looked over the team's equipment and the readouts on the monitors. The scanner data was off, the minerals were deep, but there was something more. Something beneath the surface. We're going down, Captain, said Lieutenant Dax Harris, his voice calm but with a hint of hesitation. I don't like this. The readings are all over the place. Whatever's down there. It's not just minerals. Lena didn't answer immediately. Her mind was focused on the task. Set the drill to full power. We're here to make history. The drill began its descent into the planet's crust. As it cut deeper, the crew could feel the ship vibrate with each layer it passed. But as the drill hit a strange, unnatural hardness, the entire system began to flicker. Lena gripped the console tightly. What's happening? She asked, her voice tense. Something's wrong, Dax replied, his face pale. The drill's overheating. Something's interfering with the power. Before Lena could respond, a strange hum filled the air, low and rumbling, as if the planet itself was alive. The drill shook violently, and with a final, explosive burst, it broke through the surface. But instead of hitting solid rock, the drill pierced through a dark, hollow space. A wave of cold air rushed into the mining bay, sending chills down the crew's spines. The ground beneath the ship trembled, and a blinding light shot up from the newly opened cavity. Shut it down, Shut it down now, Lena shouted, but it was too late. The ship lurched as the powerful surge of energy cracked through the vessel's outer hull. The lights flickered and went out, and for a moment they were plunged into complete darkness. Silence. Then, a voice, deep and ancient, echoed through the ship's intercom system. "You should not have come." Lena's blood ran cold. There was something in the darkness. Something that had been waiting. "What was that?" Dax whispered, his voice shaky. "I don't know, but we need to get out of here. Now." A dark, misty fog seeped in from the cracks in the walls, thick and heavy. The temperature dropped rapidly, and a sharp, metallic scent filled the air. "Look at the walls," Dax said, his voice trembling. "They're changing." Lena turned to see what he meant. The walls were not just cracked, they were moving, reshaping themselves. Strange symbols, glowing faintly, appeared along the edges of the walls, like writing from an ancient language. And from the shadows between them, figures began to emerge. "They're not human," Lena muttered, her heart racing. The figures were tall, with dark, featureless faces. Their forms were shifting, like they weren't entirely solid. The air grew heavier as the figures moved closer. Their eyes, if they could be called eyes, locked on the crew. "Captain, what is this?" Dax's voice cracked as he backed away. Lena's mind raced. This wasn't a simple mining mission anymore. They had awoken something. Something ancient. Something that had been buried for eons, waiting for the right moment to rise again. "We need to seal the hatch," Lena ordered. "Get to the escape pods." "Move!" But as they turned to make their way to the pods, the ship shook once more. The entire chamber was coming alive. The mist thickened, and the figures began to move faster, their limbs elongated, their eyes glowing with a sickly, unnatural light. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the crew saw what they were truly dealing with. The figures were not just shadows. They were beings of pure energy, their forms stretching and bending unnaturally, like ghosts with a solid core. They were ancient guardians, trapped beneath the surface for millennia, and they were not happy to be disturbed. "They've been waiting," Lena whispered. "Waiting for us to awaken them." The walls of the chamber shook as a deep, rumbling voice echoed once more, louder this time. "Leave now, or you will never leave again." The crew had no choice but to run. They darted for the escape pods, but the strange energy beings were already blocking their way. Every step they took felt heavier, as if the very atmosphere was fighting against them. The fog grew denser, and the creatures moved faster, closing in on them. As Lena reached the pod, she turned back to see the shadowy figures closing in. There was no time to hesitate. She slammed her hand down on the pod's controls. The pod launched into space, escaping the planet's grip. But as Lena looked back at the planet, she saw the surface of the planet twist and shift. The ancient beings weren't finished. They were just getting started. The Dauntless drifted in the emptiness of space, the crew breathing heavily, but none of them dared to speak. They had awoken something they could not understand. And now, they were being hunted by shadows that had waited too long to stay hidden. The silence of space felt heavier now, as though something was watching, waiting. The crew had barely escaped the planet, but in the depths below, the shadows continued to stir. They hadn't just escaped, they had unleashed something terrible. Something that would never stop hunting them. And the galaxy would never be the same. The Vanguard cruised silently through the deep void of space, its sleek form cutting through the darkness like a blade. The crew had been on a routine mission, mining valuable resources from a rocky moon on the outskirts of the Gorgos system. It was supposed to be an easy job: dig deep, extract the minerals, and return to the station. But as the ship descended toward the moon's surface, the crew had no idea that they were about to awaken something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Captain Riker Calloway stood at the helm of the Vanguard, watching the planet below through the viewfinder. It was a barren moon, its surface littered with jagged rocks and craters. No signs of life, just empty wilderness. But the scanner readings were promising rare minerals buried deep beneath the surface. Minerals that could make them rich beyond their wildest dreams. "All right, crew," Riker called out over the intercom. "Let's make this quick. We've got an extraction window of 12 hours before the next solar flare passes through. Everyone knows their roles: get the drill in, get the minerals out, and get out. Simple. Lieutenant Mara Tanaka, the ship's geologist, stepped up next to Riker, her face set in a look of concentration. The scans are solid, Captain. There's something strange beneath the surface. It's like the moon is almost hollow in some places. The mineral deposit is bigger than we thought. Riker raised an eyebrow. A hollow moon? That's a new one. But hey, if there's a deposit that big, let's not waste time. Mara hesitated but nodded. Just be cautious, Captain. We've never seen anything like this before. Whatever's down there might not be what we expect. The drill team worked quickly, lowering the massive mining rig deep into the moon's crust. As the drill cut through the rock, strange vibrations began to rumble through the ship. At first, they thought it was just the drill doing its job, but the tremors grew stronger, pulsing in waves like something stirring beneath them. Is anyone else feeling that? Mara asked, her voice tense. It's the drill, Riker said, trying to reassure her. But his eyes darted to the console. Something was off. The readings were fluctuating wildly. Then, without warning, the ship jolted violently. The drilling mechanism seized up, and alarms blared across the bridge. Sparks flew from the control panel, and Riker gritted his teeth. What the hell was that? It's not the drill, Mara said, her voice low with dread. Something down there. It's fighting back. The crew scrambled to assess the situation, but the ship shook again, harder this time. The monitors flashed with warning signals, and outside the viewport, the surface of the moon seemed to ripple, as if the very rock was alive. Get us out of here, Riker shouted, but as the engines roared to life, the ship didn't move. Something was holding them in place. What's going on? Riker demanded. We're stuck, Lieutenant Caden Bishop, the ship's engineer, said, sweat beading on his forehead. The ship's systems are being locked down by something beneath the surface. I can't override it. Captain, it's not just the ship, Mara said, her voice quivering. The entire moon is reacting. The mineral deposit we detected, it's a network of some kind. And it's not just minerals. It's a living structure. Before anyone could respond, the ship lurched again, harder than before. This time, the sound of cracking metal echoed through the halls. The lights flickered, and the hull groaned under pressure. We need to get out now, Riker barked. Activate the emergency thrusters, full power. But the thrusters didn't fire. It's no use, Captain, Caden said, his face pale. The whole moon is suddenly, the floor beneath them cracked open. A massive column of rock shot up from the depths of the moon, lifting the ship off the ground with an earth-shaking force. The ship was now suspended by a giant pillar of living rock that seemed to rise from the very core of the moon itself. Get to the escape pods, Riker shouted. We're abandoning ship. As the crew ran toward the pods, a deep, guttural rumble echoed through the ship. The rock itself seemed to pulse with life, and the walls cracked open like jaws waiting to snap shut. Then, the rock attacked. Massive tendrils of stone shot up from the cracks in the floor, slamming into the walls of the Vanguard with the force of 1,000 sledgehammers. The ship groaned under the assault, and the crew was thrown off balance. This is impossible, Mara screamed, trying to keep her footing as the walls cracked around her. It's not just alive. It's conscious. The tendrils lashed out again, tearing through the ship's hull. The walls collapsed, and the air grew thick with dust and debris. Panic set in as the crew rushed to escape, but the rock was closing in, forcing them into tighter and tighter corners. We're running out of time, Riker shouted, grabbing Mara's arm. Move. With nowhere else to go, they made a desperate dash toward the remaining escape pods. But as they neared the pod bay, the rock struck one last time. A massive tendril shot up from beneath them, smashing through the floor, blocking their only way out. We're trapped, Caden yelled. Not yet, Riker said, his voice filled with determination. He turned to the ship's console, quickly accessing the emergency override. If we can't escape through the pods, we'll do it the old-fashioned way. In a daring move, Riker activated the self-destruct sequence, intending to blow the ship free of the moon's hold. The Vanguard shook violently as the countdown began. With mere seconds to spare, the crew sprinted toward the final escape pod. The rock's tendrils lashed out once more, but the ship's self-destruct triggered a final, massive explosion. The moon seemed to tremble in pain as the Vanguard was torn free from its grip. The crew blasted off into space, watching as the moon behind them began to collapse, the once living rock turning into a mass of chaotic energy. The danger had passed, but the memories of what they had awakened remained. And as the Vanguard drifted into the safety of space, Riker looked out at the wreckage, his thoughts heavy with one question: what else was out there, waiting to fight back? The cold silence of space stretched endlessly in all directions as the Helios drifted toward its final destination, a dying star on the edge of the system. Captain Dorian Lee stared out from the observation deck, his hands clasped behind his back. The mission was supposed to be simple: extract a rare element from the star's collapsing core. But as the crew had learned over the past few weeks, nothing was ever simple in deep space. "Captain, the countdown is starting," said Lieutenant Eva Solis, her voice steady but tinged with unease. "We're entering the critical zone." Dorian turned to face her, his face grim. "I know. Keep the team on high alert. We can't afford any mistakes. Once we start this extraction, there's no turning back." The Helios maneuvered closer to the dying star, its thrusters glowing against the void. The star was unstable, on the brink of collapsing into a supernova, but deep within its core, there was a rare element, one that could revolutionize energy production across the galaxy. The element had been detected months ago, and now was time to harvest it. But they were not the first to try. The ship's sensors buzzed as the crew prepared the extraction equipment. The readings were off. At first, they thought it was just the star's instability, but the closer they got, a series of odd pulses appeared on their scanner, signals that didn't belong. "Those aren't natural," Eva said, looking at the data with concern. "It's like someone is trying to communicate with us." Dorian's brow furrowed. "From where?" "From the star's core," Eva replied. "Something's down there, Captain. Something alive." Before Dorian could respond, a sudden jolt shook the Helios. The alarms blared, lights flickered, and the ship's systems began to go haywire. The crew scrambled to regain control, but it was clear something had gone terribly wrong. In the heart of the star, deep beneath its chaotic surface, a force had been waiting. It had lain dormant for centuries, hidden from the universe's gaze. But now, the disturbance from the Helios had awakened it. The signal wasn't a cry for help, it was a warning. And as the crew unknowingly approached, they were stepping into a trap. "We've lost power," shouted engineer Marcus Gray. "We're being pulled toward the core." Dorian's pulse quickened. "Get us out of here, Marcus." Now. The thrusters fired, but the ship was already too close. A strange, unseen force gripped the Helios, dragging it toward the star's heart. The ship groaned as if it were alive, and the walls seemed to bend under the pressure. "Captain!" Eva shouted, her voice filled with fear. "We're not just being pulled in, we're being held here. Something inside the star is keeping us locked down." As the ship was drawn closer to the core, the crew could see strange, glowing tendrils of energy reaching out from the star itself. The tendrils seemed to be alive, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm, as if they were aware of the Helios' presence. "Brace yourselves," Dorian yelled, his mind racing. "We need to get to the escape pods. This ship's not going to hold together much longer." The crew scrambled to the escape pods, but as they moved through the corridors, the ship began to shake violently. The tendrils were now wrapping around the Helios, pulling it closer to the star's core with terrifying force. The crew was trapped. Eva's voice trembled as she spoke. "Captain, the star, it's not dying. It's being controlled. Something in there is keeping it alive, and it's using us to fuel itself." Dorian's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean, whatever's inside that star," Eva said, her eyes wide with dread. "It's using the ship. It's feeding off us." The Helios shuddered again, this time with a deafening crack. A massive tendril of energy shot through the hull, piercing the ship's core and sending sparks flying. The walls trembled as the force continued to pull the ship inward, and the temperature inside the ship skyrocketed. Dorian reached the control room, desperately trying to override the systems, but the ship's computer had already locked him out. The star was fighting back, and it was winning. "We need to go now," Marcus shouted, grabbing Dorian's arm. "We have no time. The core is unstable, and we're too close. The extraction's a bust. We're gonna die if we stay here." But just as Dorian turned to make a run for the escape pods, a terrible guttural roar filled the ship. It was the star itself, or whatever dark entity was controlling it. The sound shook the very foundations of the Helios, and the walls cracked open, revealing the full scope of the disaster. From the depths of the star, a massive wave of energy surged outward, blasting through the ship's hull and engulfing everything in its path. The tendrils of energy lashed out, striking the crew members, and the Helios was torn apart in an instant. The star's fury had been unleashed. Dorian awoke to a feeling of weightlessness. His body floated through the shattered remains of the Helios, and for a moment everything was silent. His mind struggled to piece together what had happened. Then he saw it. A massive, glowing eye made of pure energy hovered in front of him. It pulsed with a dark, malevolent force. And as he stared into it, he understood. The star wasn't just dying. It had been alive, and it had been waiting for something. Waiting for them. The last thing Dorian heard was the sound of the energy tendrils closing in and around him. The star wasn't dying. It was reborn, and it had taken the Helios and its crew with it. Back in the quiet void of space, the star flared brightly, a final, cataclysmic explosion that shattered the surrounding system. But in the aftermath, there was no debris, no signs of the Helios, only the distant echo of the star's final roar. The galaxy would remember it only as the last boom, the explosion that had taken everything. And for those who had survived, it was the last thing they would ever hear.